One of the big keys to Duke is Phil Henderson in the backcourt. In the first matchup against Bobby Kremen's Yellow Jackets, Phil Henderson scored 26 points. Christian Laettner may be a big key to the game. He scored and rebounded in double figures in both of the previous two matchups. We expect these teams to really get up and down the court. Here you can see what they've done against one another in the tournament.
Last meeting back in the '86 championship game in the Greensboro Coliseum. Malcolm Mackey, who had 15 rebounds last night against NC State. He'll be jumping center against Ala Abdelnaby.
And you know Bobby Kremens would like to have that kind of a performance from Mackey. He and McNeil must make a contribution.
Georgia Tech winning the opening tip, and Kenny Anderson going to work right away against Bobby Hurley.
Duke starts in the man-to-man defense. Made some hay last night with a 2-3 zone, amazingly enough. But they start in their traditional man-to-man.
Anderson, the Mackey. Georgia Tech's going to reset. Shot clock at 20 here on the opening possession of the game. Ricky draws Scott. Shot clock heading toward 10 seconds right now.
Ricky against Scott's really a good matchup.
Scott's one-hander. Mackey keeps it alive, and Malcolm rejected by Abdelnaby. Henderson for Duke. Ricky inside. Tried to reverse that, knocked out of there by McNeil, and Laettner scores.
In the first possession for Georgia Tech, they had to play against the set Duke defense. In the first possession for Duke, they play in the transition. We look for much more transition play than we do play against the set defense. When Duke is set in the defense, they will drop off Mackey and McNeil to help out. Nothing you can do about that. He's in pretty good position.
Kenny Anderson started slowly last night, but warmed to the task and hit the big baskets for Georgia Tech as the Yellow Jackets overhauled NC State in the final 20 minutes. Inside, Ala. His first bucket of the game, and Duke leads 4-2.
Nice movement by Duke, particularly Abdelnaby without the ball. Bobby Kremens up off the bench, getting on Malcolm Mackey a little bit. He needs to have more effort.
Oliver inside, McNeil scores.
That's great recognition by Brian Oliver. You saw Laettner switch out on him. Nobody picked up McNeil, and Oliver found it.
And a foul on McNeil as Laettner ran through the lane.
Johnny McNeil caught out of position in this particular transition series. You can see he's got his hands on Laettner, draws the foul. Johnny McNeil is known for fouling. He's fouled out of ball games 8 times. That's the most of anybody in the league.
Ricky jams it. The weapon for which he is known. 3 different Duke starters have scored. Blue Devils lead 6-4.
Dennis Scott makes a mistake that time, Bob. Robert Ricky broke outside, and Dennis Scott denied him the pass. Maybe that's where you want to let Ricky handle it.
Scott missing.
He was cold from 3-point range last night.
Just 1-4-7. Here's Laettner driving to the bucket. Nice fake and off the window.
If you're going to play transition basketball, you've got to have a big guy who can play like that. What great foot positioning by Laettner.
Anderson knocked to the deck, and Christian Laettner picks up his first personal foul.
You talk about big guys running in the break. See how Laettner gets himself set, then with the fake gets McNeil out of position. Once again, he gets himself set. And on the dribble, for a big guy to be able to stop and not walk is sometimes very difficult. Laettner handled that series very well.
And really protected the ball well from McNeil as he went up to the basket. Anderson's 3rd point of the game. Dan, what do you make of the fact that Georgia Tech comes into the semifinal this afternoon having shot under 50% in 6 consecutive games? Deep, the great scoring depth of the starters, but that bench is thin, and I'm wondering if they might not be wearing down a bit.
Well, you certainly, if you're going to run out of gas, this is the time of the year when you do. Georgia Tech needs to shoot the ball well to play well.
Abdelnaby, a hook. Boy, Duke looking awfully sharp at the offensive end. 10-6 Blue Devils. Oliver to the bucket.
Duke relaxing, going down the court. Can't do that against Georgia Tech.
This Duke team last night scored 104 points, an all-time ACC Tournament record for the Blue Devils. Laettner lobs to Allen. follows with a left hand.
Duke doing a nice job on the offensive end, Bob, really spreading out the court. Georgia Tech trying to attack, throws it away. Bobby Kremen's not pleased with that particular sequence, but he knows that's what his team has to do. They have to beat that set Duke defense down the court. Christian Laettner looks like he got popped on that last sequence inside. A lot of banging around as everybody was going up for the ball. Laettner ended up with it.
Trainer Max Crowder and head coach Mike Krzyzewski out there to check him over, and Christian will come out of the game. And Greg Kubek will be coming in. Well, these two, Mike Krzyzewski and Bobby Cremens, both with a lot to offer in even matchup, as those numbers suggest. And even though Duke's won the season series,
their teams have something to do with that too. I think Bobby and Mike one-on-one might be a pretty good matchup, but they both have had pretty good teams, and when you both have good teams, you have even matchups.
McNeil up ahead to Anderson. Georgia Tech trailing by 4. Kenny spins. Misses. The rebound.
That's a tough shot. Tough shot.
Here's Hurley.
Duke's going to try to spread out, put a bunch of guys on the perimeter, try to find somebody inside.
Hurley in the lane of the Giants. Kubek crashing into the hands of Abdelnabi. He misses the jam. And we've got a foul called. I think it's on Mackey.
Once the ball bounce around in here, Mackey saves it. McNeil bounces off his hand. Anderson slaps it away. Ala with the dunk. Maybe just should lay it in, but there's Mackey getting the foul, trying to take it away from Kubek. I don't know that Georgia Tech's inside guys can afford fouls like those in those kind of situations. If they're going to commit a foul when Duke is attacking the basket, that's one thing, but in those kind of situations, they don't have enough fouls to give.
Henderson for 3. He's got 57 this year, an all-time Duke record. 15-8 Blue Devils. I think the key phrase that you used, Dan, was attack the basket for the Blue Devils. They've done that here in the first 5 minutes of the game.
Duke attacks you on offense and they attack you on defense, and that's why they're successful. Georgia Tech has to find a way to get into the rhythm of their game, get the ball in the hands of this guy right here, Scott and Oliver, when they can score.
Here's Brickey with the takeaway, but Brown gets it back.
That's a walk.
Georgia Tech, Dan, basically is a straight, go-up straight shooting team. Duke will try to take that away from them, but a great degree of effectiveness. We'll be back in a moment after this from our good friends at Budweiser. Welcome back to the Charlotte Coliseum, everybody. Bob Rathbun and Dan Bonner, Paul Cameron in our Sports Center set. 15-8, the Blue Devils.
Duke has been effective getting the ball inside early in the basketball game. You see Abdelnabi catching the ball. He has a chance to dribble and turn. Nobody from Georgia Tech comes down to help, so they get the easy basket. But then Georgia Tech runs the ball up the court, beats Duke down the other way.
Is that the key for Georgia Tech, to get it and go?
I think Duke plays so well on the defensive end of the court that one of the things that you really want to do, if you're Georgia Tech and you're smallish, a perimeter shooting team, you'd really like to get the ball down the court before Duke can get that defense set.
Bobby Hurley eclipsing his tutor, Tommy Amaker. Laettner fouled before the bucket. Ryan Oliver picking up his first.
Oliver talking to Dennis Scott. They missed an assignment in there. They didn't get to switch the way they wanted to. Oliver picks up the foul. This is a small lineup in the ball game for Georgia Tech. Mackey is going to come back in, giving the Yellow Jackets a little more size, but Laettner and Brickey are awfully big.
Brickey, of course, with his great leaping ability, plays a lot bigger than 6'5". Abdelnabi backing in, working on Mackey and putting it home.
You can't let Abdelnabi catch the ball there, take a dribble, and push his way to the basket. In our first semifinal game, you saw Virginia do a great job dropping down inside, making the big guys kick the ball out. That's what the Yellow Jackets have to do today.
Oliver. Ryan's second basket of the game. He had 22 last night against State. He had scored 21 in 3 previous ACC tournament games.
Dennis Scott had 66 points in 2 games this year against Duke. He has not scored yet. He had 5 3-point shots in each of those games. So Duke, I'm sure, sitting there waiting for him to explode.
Early, short of the 3. Mackey the board.
And in trying to adjust to that Duke power inside, Georgia Tech going to a zone.
There's Scott.
Gee, right on cue, Dennis.
3-pointer number 107. He had just one last night against State. But a major key for Georgia Tech. To get to the championship game tomorrow, that man has to get hot and stay hot.
Georgia Tech lined up in a zone. They're matching up, looks like out of a 1-3-1 kind of set, and that's one way to disrupt that. Bobby Crimmins has to wonder what he's going to do. Gee, I play a man-to-man, they kill me inside. We play zone, they drill 3-pointers.
Anderson's hit a pair of 3s in this game. Duke by 7. Scott comes right back. Oh, ain't we got fun.
That's just great offense by Georgia Tech. Bricky's a very good defensive player, but Georgia Tech picked him off very well. And Dennis Scott doesn't need much room to shoot that 3-pointer. Neal backs off Bricky just a little bit. And his own defense very conscious of inside. See, that's what you get on this zone. You get the help against the inside play.
Bricky to the basket. Controlled by Mackey.
Boy, nice catch by Mackey.
3rd rebound for Mackey today, 18 in the tournament.
Bobby Hurley doing a nice job getting back and getting his feet set against Kenny Anderson. Anderson hasn't been able to go by.
Inside McNeil, outside Scott. This time penetrates and draws the foul on Bricky.
It makes a defensive player, even one as good as Robert Bricky, think twice when the last 2 times the guy you're guarding is drilled 3-pointers. You're in a little bit bigger hurry to get out to him. Dennis Scott's a clever enough offensive player that he takes advantage and goes on the floor.
The Big 8 surprises continue. Colorado's in the championship game. UConn knocks off Georgetown, and Louisville struggles but wins in the Metro. 20-16. Duke leading here, 12:59 left in the first half.
Maybe the Colorado Buffaloes ought to rethink the firing of Coach Tom Miller.
Anderson outside Oliver. Kubek on him. Scott screening.
Hurley and Davis switched very well on the first screen. Double teamed on the second screen. Good help inside. Anderson not able to get the pass there. Kenny Anderson appeared a bit impatient yesterday. Watch him, he's going to appear a bit impatient today. There's the switch. Davis picks that up very well. As Anderson gets back to the middle, Hurley comes to double team. Anderson tries to force the pass.
Back live, another Duke miss. Blue Devils have gone cold, and now it's Anderson. Oliver, long 3-pointer, strips the cold. Anthony Oliver, Georgia Tech with 3 threes in a 1-point game.
How do you do?
Here they come. 12:10 to play in the first half.
Carl Brown now in the ball game is going to try to put some pressure on Bobby Hurley as Georgia Tech drops back into the man-to-man.
A runner by Davis won't go. Leitner, it's tipped and a foul, and it's on Georgia Tech. And Malcolm Mackey has picked up his second.
The shot that Davis attempts, Bob, is not really a very good shot, but what he does with his penetration is force the defense to come and pick him up. Nobody is available to block out Leitner, and the result is a foul.
A timeout in Charlotte with Duke leading by 1.
Be very rewarding. Today's game is brought to you by Budweiser, U.S. Air, Jefferson Pilot Life Insurance Company, Buick, First Union National Bank, Food Lion, and by Pepsi.
37th annual ACC Tournament semifinals. The winner to meet the surprising Virginia Cavaliers. Duke is up 1 here with 11:57 left in the opening half. The Blue Devils have the basketball. Bobby Hurley to get it in. Here's Billy McCaffrey being shut off.
You can see where Duke has gotten a lot of scoring inside. That's where they're going now.
Leitner.
Kubek just cleared Dennis Scott out of the middle of that zone.
McCaffrey, it's off. It went off McCaffrey last, and Georgia Tech's got it.
Georgia Tech playing in that 2-3 zone on the inbounds pass, played it very actively and very effectively.
During halftime, we'll have the Mazda game summary. A look at first period action, and Paul Cameron will be rejoining us. Anderson, a floater, had to adjust it when Laker came out to meet him. And McCaffrey has it for Duke. Anderson missed a wide open Dennis Scott. Had he stopped and passed the ball back to Scott, Scott had an open three-pointer. It's going to be on Leitner for crashing the boards. Good block out by Johnny McNeil. Second personal on Christian. He talked about the value of Christian Leitner against Georgia Tech, having double-figure scoring and rebounding games in each of the first 2 games. Those 2 fouls, possibly a big stat early in this ball game. 11:15 left in the opening half. Kubek now matched up against Dennis Scott. Georgia Tech can take the lead here. Scott delivers. For some reason, when Scott sees those 4 letters, D-U-K-E, across the other guy's shirts, he's breathes fire. Leitner surveys, looks over the defense, and finds Hurley. McCaffrey. Kubek got away with one. It's out of bounds to Georgia Tech. Bobby Cremins pointing out that possibly there should have been a foul call, but he'll take the basketball. 21-20. Bobby Cremins played in the last ACC tournament held in the old building in Charlotte. His South Carolina Gamecocks losing in double overtime to NC State in the championship game and sat home. Only the ACC winner went to the NCAAs. No NIT because South Carolina was hosting an NCAA tournament. Now Thomas Hill in the ball game for Duke is now the 3rd guy to try his hand on this. Breeze, runner goes. Out with 4. With Duke's size inside, Georgia Tech really has to play Duke honestly on the perimeter. They cannot allow that penetration. Halfway through the first half. Ricky now back on Dennis Scott. Hill matched up against Brian Oliver. Pretty good screen by Scott. Carl Brown. Scott faking. He had Hill in his back pocket, just couldn't bury the shot. You notice what Henderson did. The fake got Hill out of the way, and then Henderson was right in front of Dennis Scott. Henderson leaving Carl Brown to defend against Dennis Scott. Rookie missing the outside jumper. Abdelnaby counted on Dennis Scott. Abdelnaby just too big in there for Dennis Scott. Alla now with 8 points, and Duke jumping back to a 3-point lead. Abdelnaby, Dennis Scott has pretty good position, but Abdelnaby is just too big and strong. He's able to hold his ground, and on the long rebound, he claims the basket and then powers it home. Solid senior season for Alla. You see his numbers yesterday. Career bests in free throw shooting, rebounding, and points. 9 points today for Abdelnaby. 25-21. Duke with some pressure after the made free throw. Oliver pulls the trigger. Abdelnaby the rebound. Georgia Tech, after that stretch there, Bob, where they made a couple of 3-pointers in a row, have gone cold the last couple of possessions. Have had some open shots and missed them. Still playing in his own defense, worried about the inside. Hill saves it. Anderson collides with his own man, and up the court it comes to Brian Oliver. It's one of those things that drives a coach crazy. Both guys really hustling hard after the ball. 25-23 Duke. 8:40 left in the first half. And a near steal by Anderson. Carl Brown can put some pretty good pressure on a guard out front. He and Anderson really are a nice defensive duo out there. Anderson. And a lot of banging. This one on Abdelnaby. Abdelnaby had some success the last time using that big body to get position.
Phil Henderson did a nice job splitting the zone defense, but as this ball hits the back of the rim, watch everybody going after it right there. Abdelnaby goes over the back of Johnny McNeil. Nobody really blocks out, but everybody goes up in the air. And you saw the angle that the official under the basket has. He can see the black shirts in front, the white shirts behind. He calls the foul on the guys behind.
Carl Brown, down to Anderson.
Munlin now in the ball game for Georgia Tech. Those 2 fouls that Mackey picks up early, a big factor.
Scott back to Oliver. This is a 3-pointer. Bricky, I get it.
Long rebounds on those 3-point shots. Bricky out by the foul line, corralling it. You saw Abdelnaby once again. He was matched up in the defense against Munlin. He just left Munlin and went to help against Dennis Scott.
Tipped away, but Henderson short.
Abdelnaby is hurt.
Carl Brown got bumped. And now they call the time for Abdelnaby, but Carl Brown also taking some punishment. And Allah going toward the Duke bench. It looks like a shoulder injury.
And it was a collision with his own teammate. Allah really having a tough time staying out of the way of his own teammates here early in the ball game.
A timeout on the floor. We'll continue with more, but first, this word from our good friends at Budweiser.
Maybe not.
Duke leading by 2, and here's where Abdelnaby was shaken up a moment ago.
We thought that Abdelnaby did it running into his own player, but you'll see here that the culprit is one Dennis Scott. Looks like maybe he stoved a thumb or a finger in there as Scott reaches in and slaps the ball away. Okay, he didn't stove his thumb or his finger. What do I know? Stoved his shoulder.
I thought it might have been the shoulder, but then as we looked at the replay, I thought too it was on his hand, but it is the shoulder. Trust your instincts. 7:16 left.
Maybe it's like a toothache. Your mouth aches, but you're not sure which tooth it is.
That's right. 25-23. Duke leading. 7:10 left. Poked away nicely by Brown, and a foul called on Henderson.
Not only did Brown poke that ball away, Bob, but we talked about the importance of attack on offense. Brown, with a very aggressive play, trying to pitch ahead right there, draws the foul. Pretty good foul by Henderson because Georgia Tech had a breakaway dunk.
A 2-point lead for the Blue Devils. First foul on Henderson.
Of course, Carl Brown, who was knocked very hard to the floor, probably doesn't think it was a very good foul. Henderson way down in the lane off Carl Brown.
Anderson forcing one. Henderson just drops down a little further and gets the rebound.
That's a good description of what Kenny Anderson, I think, has done in this entire game so far, Bob. Just doesn't seem very relaxed.
Anderson for 3. Bill with 9.
That's the third Duke three-pointer of the day.
Oliver made the fake on Laker, then ran into Thomas Hill. I'm wondering, excuse me,
Bob, you picture Georgia Tech as a team of primarily standing jump shooters, but here they show that they have the ability to go to the basket as well. That's really a nice penetration kind of move, and when you make those kind of moves, you do a lot of scoring from the free throw line because you create foul situations by taking it to the basket, pump faking, and then going up.
A 5-point lead for Duke. Oliver did everything but go in the basket. Talking about Kenny Anderson, I wonder about this, the first ACC tournament.
Kenny Anderson has had such a great freshman year that you forget that he is a freshman. After all, this is his first tournament. Gee, Oliver misses both of them.
A 72% foul shooting. 28-23 Duke, tipped away, and now the Yellow Jackets are running.
Duke has done a nice job getting back on defense when Anderson has been handling the ball in the middle of the break. I think Anderson needs to have a couple of those opportunities go well for him to feel like he's comfortable in the basketball game.
Yeah, we really haven't called the name Bobby Hurley too often this afternoon, but he's done a solid job on Anderson.
Well, since we're not calling the name of Anderson, Hurley has something to do with that.
Here's Scott.
In a world of trouble. What a catch by Anderson.
running out of bounds.
Now that's a nice job by Anderson to work that two-man game with Dennis Scott. Hill had to come and help, or excuse me, Bricky had to come and help against Anderson. And this time when he pitches it back out, it's not to James Munlin or Carl Brown, it's to Dennis Scott.
28-26, Duke by 2 late. Georgia Tech.
Scott really doing some work on the boards. He's playing the inside on that zone, and he is really doing a job on the glass.
Intended for McNeil, but too much on that one.
Well, that was James Munlin that the ball was being thrown to, Bob, and I think James was a little surprised he doesn't get the pass coming his way very much.
28-26 Duke and 5:09 left. Mike Krzyzewski putting Ala Abdelnaby back in the game now.
The game has had a much slower start to it than we anticipated, Bob. Everybody might be a little heavy low.
Backdoor cutting, Bricky.
That's good defense by McNeil.
And he secures the rebound to finish it off. Oliver faking, backing, and hit it.
This is a 6'4" guard, goes at somebody 6'11", takes him to the basket. I think he has some confidence in his game.
Just a touch. Tied at 28. Christian Leitner, shot clock at 25. Anderson coming around, firing. Another three for Phil. He's had 4 3-pointers in this game. Duke by 3.
Duke got a lot of points inside early. Georgia Tech has gone to sort of that matchup zone. Henderson has found the opening.
Carl Brown misfiring on a 3. Abdelnaby and Oliver going in. And they're going to call the foul, I believe, on Oliver. Yes.
Oliver got him by the arm as he went up there. Oliver plays inside. That's 2 fouls now on Brian Oliver. He's got to watch himself in the last 3 minutes and 59 seconds of this half.
A timeout on the floor here in Charlotte. With the score, it's Duke 31 and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets 28. We'll be back.
The Q45 luxury sedan from Infiniti.
The Duke Blue Devils holding a 3-point lead in this ACC semifinal game. Early in the ball game, Duke had its own way inside, but you notice Georgia Tech, in switching to the zone, what that has done for them has brought help to the inside position. Carl Brown, Johnny McNeil able to double team on Bricky. McNeil with the blocked shot. Georgia Tech wasn't getting any help inside early. They have with the switch of defense.
Jackets trailing by 3, 31-28. Duke's biggest lead today, the 9. Oliver spins to the baseline. And Oliver the rebound. Scott firing the bomb over the glass, out of bounds to Duke. The announcers for this game selected and compensated by Raycom Sports and Entertainment and JP Sports. Any use of this broadcast without the express permission of Raycom and JP Sports is prohibited. The 3-point numbers to date.
Phil Henderson with all of those makes for Georgia Tech, or for Duke, excuse me.
Nice and short. McNeil stretching back to grab it. Kenny Anderson firing over Hurley.
Once again, Bob, I think a forced shot right there. Hurley has not scored in the ball game today, but he's done an excellent defensive job against Anderson. Now, Scott just pushed Leitner right out of bounds. That's a couple of fouls now against Dennis Scott.
Scott, Mackey, and Oliver all with 2 each. Leitner has a pair for Duke.
Anderson with 4 turnovers early. We're talking about the job that Hurley has done against him. Anderson with 4 turnovers early in the ballgame. Only 1 for 5 shooting.
In the game, as you take a look at Henderson here.
Dennis Scott gets down next to Christian Leitner and shoves him out of bounds. You know, if Dennis hadn't lost all that weight over the summer, Leitner would have probably ended up 2 rows in instead of just 1.
Talking about Kenny Anderson, he had 8 turnovers at the game at Cameron Indoor Stadium.
That last turnover was the biggest with 7 seconds left in the ball game. He penetrated inside, lost the ball. With Georgia Tech having an opportunity to get the last shot, tie the game, or win it.
32-28. Duke leading, and Leitner puts him up by 5. 3 minutes to go in the half.
Man-to-man defense for Duke.
They dare Brown to shoot. In it goes to Scott. Up and in.
Henderson and Leitner guarding McNeil and Brown. Both went after Brown, and as they tried to react back to find their own men, there wasn't anybody there to help against Scott. Brown trying to avoid the foul.
Picked up by Carl Brown. Zigzags through the Duke defenders. Hard bounce to Scott. Dangerous place to dribble. And Georgia Tech hangs on to it.
Scott needed to dribble that basketball because as he caught it, he didn't have his feet in synchronization with the way he was moving with the ball. So that dribble was necessary so he wouldn't travel. That's something Dennis Scott does very well, is get his feet set on the run, but he wasn't able to do it that time. Tech is fortunate to keep it.
Anderson with 2:20 left in the half. Handles it out front. Georgia Tech is trailing by 3.
Duke now on the inbounds play going to the 2-3 zone that was so effective for them last night.
Scott, oh, what a pass, and the slam.
If you're going to play 2-3 zone, there's certain people for Georgia Tech you have to find, and you prefer that you find them before they dunk the ball in the basket.
33-32, Duke by 1, and at 50 left in the half.
A great deal of movement for Duke offensively.
Leitner powers up with the right hand.
There's lots of times when you're not moving on offense, if you get some penetration, that'll create an easy basket. Nice play by Hurley.
35-32 Duke.
Duke is back into the man-to-man. That zone was just after the inbounds pass.
Ryan Oliver. Leitner cradles it, releases now to Hurley.
It's round 3.
Bobby to the basket.
And that's Dennis Scott with his 3rd personal foul. Very aggressive play by Bobby Hurley.
Boy, picked his spot pretty well here.
Bobby Cremins, you can see he's not very pleased. Scott's got to realize the situation. Right there, Hurley takes the ball right to him. Obvious foul by Dennis Scott. You got to know there's only a minute left in the first half. You've got 2 fouls. You cannot pick up a foul in that situation.
So Dennis will think about it on the Tech bench.
And with where Scott has had to play today, playing down on the inside in the middle of that zone, battling on the boards, he's much more prone to pick up fouls in a game like this because he is being attacked by the Duke Blue Devils. Hurley with 4 assists attacked him pretty well there.
Bobby's first point of the game.
I'll tell you, the Duke Blue Devils cannot play any better defense against Dennis Scott than to have him sitting over next to Bobby Cremins.
It's a good place for him as far as the folks from Durham are concerned. McNeil runs it down in the corner. 60 seconds remaining in the first half.
Georgia Tech in this situation would be wise to run the offense over, work that shot clock down, get a good one.
McNeil the screen. That's Brown.
It's no coincidence that when McNeil and Brown catch the ball on the perimeter, they're wide open. Duke really playing off, trying to help out against the other fellas.
Shot clock down to 10 seconds as Oliver fires and misses. Out of bounds. And Duke with it. Mike Krzyzewski's club leading by 4. Could be a pretty key swing here. Jackets had a chance to knock it down. Now Duke with the opportunity for the final shot of the half.
And Georgia Tech really did run the offense very well, Bob. They got the shot that they wanted. It just didn't go for Brian Oliver. Looked like it might have slid off the heel of his hand or something. That's the game clock. Down in the lower right, the shot clock off.
Duke spreads the floor.
Georgia Tech matches up now, man-to-man defense. Anderson going to try to keep it away from Hurley. That's a nice job by Kenny Anderson. The clock's running down there trying to throw him to Hurley the ball.
And it's an offensive foul on Hurley.
That's tremendous defense. Tremendous defense. Mike Krzyzewski doesn't think it's tremendous defense, but Kenny Anderson with a nice job denying the ball to Bobby Hurley. McNeil gets down, gets himself set. That's great defense.
36-32, so the Jackets have another crack at it, and it is Anderson.
Short field.
And the half is history. So Tech ended up with the final shot, but could not convert, and the two teams head to the locker room in a 4-point spread. It's Duke 36 and Georgia Tech 32 here at intermission. And now let's rejoin Paul Cameron. Now let's go to Paul Cameron.
Oh, well, they shot 39% in the first half last night, but came back to shoot well over 50 in the second half. So certainly they're capable. The three-point field goals haven't really gone in as well as Georgia Tech would like. Amazingly, very few free throws in this ball game. Duke usually shoots a lot of free throws. They haven't shot many in this basketball game.
The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets have attempted 28 three-point shots in the game and a half of this tournament. They've made only 6. They've won a game, and they're only down 4 here to Duke.
Dennis Scott with 15, Brian Oliver with 11, Kenny Anderson has been held to 4. Henderson with 12, Leitner with 10, Abdelnaby with 9. That 10 and 9 for Leitner and Abdelnaby. Duke be able to punch it inside, particularly early. There you can see Anderson, 4.7 assists, but those 4 turnovers. I think Bobby Hurley, even though he's only got 1 point, has done a masterful job against Kenny Anderson, disrupting his flow, if you will, on the offensive end of the court.
Statistics, at least on that occasion, not telling the entire story.
You can't really measure each person's contribution to his own team by a statistical comparison because different people mean different things to teams.
Anderson, short of the 3. Flat-footed rebound from Malcolm Mackey. Way out across to Scott and out of bounds.
Dennis Scott telling his teammate, come on, let's go. Brian Oliver hanging his head a little bit on that particular pass.
We just get the feeling that Tech is not in sync offensively.
Of course, the Duke defense has an awful lot to do with it.
That's true. Christian Leitner stepping out to drill it. He's got a dozen. Duke leads by 6.
Duke Blue Devils in the man-to-man defense. Anderson and Scott on the same side of the court is a good play. They can really work a 2-man game pretty effectively. There's Scott coming over the screen.
Stuffed. Take your pick. And they're going to call it on Bricky.
Dennis Scott really knows how to create his opportunities. That's 2 fouls now against Bricky, but Dennis Scott is not just a standing still jump shooter. He can put the ball on the deck and go to the basket, as he showed you right there.
Dennis Scott enjoyed his first ACC tournament win last night. When he was at Flint Hill, they played in 12 tournaments, went 41-0, and Scott was the MVP of all 12 tournaments. Drilling that free throw. He's got 16 points this afternoon.
That man right there would like to see Dennis Scott be the MVP of this particular tournament. Generally indicates success.
17 points this afternoon.
Bob, it's interesting the point that you make about Georgia Tech seemingly being out of sync offensively, and I agree with you, but even given that, they're only down by 4. There's a foul against Robert Bricky being over the back of Johnny McNeil. McNeil is entitled to his position on the court. Bricky can't jump over his back. Mike Krzyzewski doesn't agree with the call, but that's what the call was. Don't really get a chance to see it there. As Dennis Scott, as a matter of fact, gee, that's a big call in the ball game. Looked like Scott held his ground pretty well.
Dennis for 3. Followed by Tech, and that's out of bounds. Georgia Tech possession. And the Jackets down by 4.
Brian Oliver got his hand on that ball, enabling Malcolm Mackey to control it. It was blocked in there by somebody, though, which is why it sort of squirted out of bounds in the manner that it did. Anderson across to Oliver. Bob, we talked talked about Georgia Tech needing some sort of contribution from somebody other than the big three. They haven't really gotten it. McNeil has 2. Nobody else has scored.
That bounces out, but there's Malcolm Mackey. He misses. Bricky avoids the travel but throws it away. And a foul on Hurley.
2 fouls now on Bobby Hurley. Bricky just not able to keep his feet. He had to get rid of that basketball or he was going to walk. Pretty alert play by Hurley. Mackey, or McNeil, looks like he's going for the dunk here. Mackey gets the ball. He misses the shot. There's Bricky. A lot good pressure by Mackey. Nice catch by McNeil. Hurley coming from behind, trying for the steal, gets the foul.
Dennis Scott. Boy, he's got all the moves, folks.
If you're Robert Bricky and you're guarding Dennis Scott out on the perimeter and Scott throws it inside to Malcolm Mackey, you don't need to drop inside and help, but it's instinct. Duke teaches the defensive principles so well. Bricky turns, and by the time he realizes, no, I don't want to do that, Scott has the ball and is sticking it in the basket.
Leitner short with it. Into the arms of Kenny Anderson.
Haven't seen too much of Anderson in the open court.
Scott missing, but Mackey is there. And Georgia Tech hits its first basket from its freshman, and Duke takes a timeout as the Jackets have caught the Devils at 38. And Bobby Cremins encouraging Dennis Scott and company. We've got a tie game in Charlotte. Welcome back to the Charlotte Coliseum, everybody. Georgia Tech and Duke tied at 38 and 17:29 remaining. The winner to meet Virginia tomorrow afternoon for the championship of the 37th ACC Tournament. Mike Krzyzewski calling that timeout. Now his Blue Devils attacking inside with Ala Abdelnaby. Bricky slithers in to get the offensive stick back.
That's where Duke had success in the first half, Bob. When that ball goes into Ala Abdelnaby, now Malcolm Mackey turns the ball over. He stepped in bounds. That's a very bad mistake. Anderson and Mackey are trying to say that there you can see the kind of attention that Ala Abdelnaby draws. Brian Oliver simply doesn't block out Robert Bricky, and then the turnover on the inbounds pass.
And Henderson makes a pay. 5 3-pointers.
And what was a tie just a few seconds ago is now a 5-point lead.
Out of bounds to Duke.
Boy, that turnover costly on the inbounds play. And Bobby Cremins is really irritated about that.
43-38 Duke. Hurley has Scott on him, and I don't know whether he just took his eye off and lost control of the ball, but it's a turnover. Inside, Leitner pokes it away.
Nice job by Leitner. Brian Oliver hurrying a little bit on the offensive end of the court. I don't think that Georgia Tech needs to force against the Duke defense. They've got to wait for the good opportunity.
Anderson. Kenny Anderson surveys, and a quick outlet to Scott. Pulls the trigger. Misses. McNeil up and over Abdelnaby.
We talked about the Duke, or excuse me, the Georgia Tech wasn't getting contributions from Mackey and McNeil, but Mackey just had a follow basket. That's now 4 points for Johnny McNeil, and those were a big 2.
43-40 Duke. Ala travels.
Bob, I'm sitting here trying to figure out exactly what Georgia Tech is doing on the defensive end of the court. It looks like some sort of a combination defense. Ala takes a look. You see, he picks up that pivot one right there. The dribble and the 3-step doesn't really work. They're waiting for Malcolm Mackey to take a seat on the bench. Bobby Cremins substituting with Carl Brown. Georgia Tech once again very small in terms of the lineup.
Dennis Scott working on Kubek. McNeil plants the screen. Scott to the line.
That's good helping defense.
Well, they are on you. Scott. And Hurley comes out of there with it. Up ahead, Henderson controls it and scores.
Great job by Hurley helping out outside defensively, finding Henderson on the fast break.
Still had 24 last night, 17 today, and it's out of bounds to Georgia Tech. 45-40, Duke.
I think Georgia Tech would like to be able to fast break a little bit more than they are to get easy opportunities, but they don't want to be as impatient as they have been thus far against the set defense.
McNeil. Out to Brown, across to Oliver.
Brown head, or excuse me, Johnny McNeil headed that baby out of bounds. Duke doing a great job on defense, getting back to the basketball, helping out, and then returning to the basketball. Hurley really doing a nice job that time running at Oliver.
45-40.
Brown back in the game. Georgia Tech in that matchup zone once again.
Oh, come on.
Here is Leitner going to work.
Got to get a body on him and block him out. Good catch.
Oliver stuffed by Davis, a held ball. Possession arrow, Georgia Tech. Well, the block shot has not been a factor today, but that's another weapon in this Duke defense.
We saw earlier in the basketball game Oliver get down behind everybody and score. This time Brian Davis, Christian Laettner waiting for him. Nice job to get back on defense by the Duke Blue Devils.
Kubek, a foul on McNeil. When Duke starts playing that tight defense, they start howling at the moon. They start slapping the floor, and
they can really smother a team's offense, and they have done that the last couple of possessions for Georgia Tech. Yellow Jackets not in anything resembling an offense.
Oliver had to change his shot. And a fouling sign on Duke.
Foul's going to be against Bobby Hurley. Dennis Scott working the boards. Brian Oliver misses another open jump shot. Duke with 5 team fouls in the second half. Brian Oliver getting in. That's a tough shot. Laettner going up, makes him change the shot. Dennis Scott standing under the basket. Nobody blocks him out. He comes down with the ball. Hurley slaps it out of his hands, but gets him on the wrist. That's 3 fouls now against Bobby Hurley.
And Mr. Scott to the free throw line.
And as Scott makes that, Bob, again, even though Brian Oliver missed that shot, his penetration causes the defense to come and help. That ruins the block-out assignments. That's not why nobody was inside blocking out Dennis Scott.
21 points now for Dennis. You saw his season numbers. 47-42 Duke and 14:08 to play.
It's a 1-3-1 zone alignment that Georgia Tech is showing. Then they really don't try to match up with the Duke Blue Devils as they cut through.
Ala Abdelnaby returning. And Greg Kubek going out of the Duke lineup. Jerry Donaghy hands the ball to Christian Laettner, and in it comes to Davis.
The scene there for Georgia Tech very clear. Looks like a 2-3 kind of set now defensively.
Hurley and Laettner trying to work that lob, but Georgia Tech. Anderson, a 3. That's no good. Kenny follows. That won't go. Again, Georgia Tech. That one caught free, and Abdelnaby's got it.
Boy, Anderson has no shooting stroke at all today. That guy does, though.
I guess so. Henderson with 19. 49-42. Well, you might wonder, too, Dan, about some of these nagging injuries at Tech. Brian Oliver's got that stress fracture that he's played with in the ankle all season long. Anderson, they tell me, has had some shin splints. Here's Oliver connecting from the outside. But boy, he's a tough customer, this Brian Oliver.
The only reason he's second team All-ACC is because it would look untoward to have 3 guys on the first team from the same ball club. He's really had a great year.
49-45, Blue Devils. Look at Davis open in the corner. Now knocked away. McNeil really scrapping, and Anderson comes up with it.
Georgia Tech back in a man-to-man right there. Dennis Scott calling for the 3.
Mackey Strong to the basket.
Took a long time to get that one up on the boards, and you can certainly understand it with Leitner and Abdelnaby standing right there. Georgia Tech coming back once again.
49-47. These two teams played it right to the wire in the regular season, with Duke winning both. No different today. Hurley driving, dishing, misconnecting.
Nice defense by McNeil, sliding in front of the offensive man. Oh, what a catch.
Scott to the bucket. Timeout.
Kenny Anderson let that ball go. I have no idea how Dennis Scott was able to catch it. It bounced off about 3 hands, bounced off his own chest, but he controlled it, then the left hand for the basket. Leitner pushing against McNeil inside.
Abdelnaby. Anderson saves it. Tight ropes the baseline. My goodness. Here's Scott. Nice bounce to Oliver. Duke timeout. Georgia Tech has taken a 2-point lead. And 11:19 to play. We'll be back. Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, an 8-0 run in the last 2 minutes.
Georgia Tech doing a great job defensively and also on the boards. Kenny Anderson, that's some athletic ability right there to stay in bounds. Perfect fast break. The big three. Anderson to Scott to Oliver. Now to look at it, Kenny Anderson has not had too many opportunities to operate in the open court today. Brian Oliver finishing that one off right there.
Stay tuned for the Holly Farms Players of the Game Award, brought to you by Holly Farms, a proud sponsor of ACC basketball for 14 consecutive years.
Georgia Tech operating in a combination defense, playing some zone, some man-to-man. Henderson's been the only one who's been able to solve it. Another three-pointer for him, but that defense has really presented Duke some problems.
Anderson, through a maze of arms, puts it in.
We've been talking about Anderson trying to force it. He forced it there, but that time he was successful. In the second half, Hurley with 4 turnovers, Anderson with none, and that's been a factor too.
53-52, Georgia Tech. Anderson. And to Oliver the stop. Duke on top by a point. 54-53.
Duke would certainly like to go inside as many times as they can. They have a big advantage in there. Scott does have the 3 fouls.
Oliver, a flutter. And Mackey with a foul.
Tough shot. It was a good screen out front. Brian Oliver got loose, but Duke comes and helps so well defensively.
Third personal on Malcolm Mackey. 54-53, Blue Devils, 10-16 left. Mackey will stay in.
This game has not quite had the flow that the previous 2 games had, but it's nonetheless a close, intense basketball game, as both coaches knew it would be.
Batted down by McNeil, and John pulls it out of the air.
Leitner just lazy with the pass.
Anderson.
Well, now, we need to point out that Bobby Hurley is not in the basketball game. Those last 2 drives of Kenny Anderson, Hurley was not in there. Hurley, with that, gets up, and now he's sitting at the scorer's table waiting to come back.
55-54, Georgia Tech.
Mackey really pushing on Abdelnaby inside. Remember, Mackey's got 3 personal fouls.
Bricky got twisted and throws it away.
The defense that Georgia Tech is playing really seems to have Mike Krzyzewski's club confused. It's one of those defenses you don't know whether to run your man-to-man stuff against or your zone stuff against, because it's not really a zone, it's not really a man-to-man. Guys are cutting through, they're switching those cuts. Georgia Tech's people are not really moving around on the court. They're guarding areas, but playing man-to-man when somebody comes in your area. It's very difficult to handle. Duke now with 16 turnovers.
And this man always hard to handle. 26 for Dennis. 3 3-pointers, and the Jackets lead by 4.
Dennis Scott comes flying off the screen, catches the ball while he's still turning to the basket, and releases it before he comes down and makes the 3. See Oliver dropping down into help against Leitner. That's been real successful for Georgia Tech.
Ricky on the baseline. Nope. Leitner the offensive rebound.
One thing that Georgia Tech has had problems with in their defense is if Duke is able to penetrate.
Easiest way to call this would be a matchup zone if you had to put a tag on it.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sitting here trying to put a tag on it. I'm having a difficult time.
Always here to help.
Yes, well, I appreciate that, Bob.
Oliver.
Sort of reminds me of something the University of Pittsburgh used to do. They used to call it the amoeba defense. And it was just one of those things where I think they called it something different so it would confuse you. You wouldn't have some confidence against it. But this is...
Didn't Dale Brown have one of the freak defense that he used in the Final Four a few years ago? Henderson. Well, you saw that last graphic on Phil. He's done fine from the 919 area code, but boy, when it goes into 704, he's having some problems. 58-55, Yellow Jackets. .24 for Phil. What a day. The Jackets by 2 and 8.5 to go. Virginia beat Clemson earlier today.
McNeil is out there really laying some screens on people. Scott dropped the ball, or he had one.
McNeil on the doorstep.
McNeil and Mackey were both there. Had McNeil not gotten it, Mackey would have. Those two fellas have played extremely well in the second half. Duke has not had the inside dominance they did early in the game.
Those two only scored 2 in the first half. They've got 8 between them in the second half. Leitner connection. He's got 16, and the Blue Devils back within 2.
One problem that you have playing against a defense like this is a tendency to overpass. The last couple of times, there's a 5-second call. Bobby Clement's really upset, but the last couple of times, Duke has gotten the ball. The open guys have shot it, and I think that's what they need to do. They've turned it over when they've tried to overpass.
A timeout in Charlotte. 7:50 to play. Jackets by 2. Now this from Natural Light.
Hi, it's me.
Georgia Tech with a 2-point lead. 7:50 left in the ballgame with Bobby Hurley out of the game. Kenny Anderson able to maneuver in the half court right there, penetrates all the way to the basket. Hurley came back in right after that one.
Look at the point distribution. The paint even, and something you might not expect.
Well, another thing you might not expect is Duke has gotten precisely 0 points off the bench. With Duke with that deep bench, the last time these two teams played, Brian Davis had 16 points off the bench.
It drops for Christian Leitner.
Well, we're right back where we started now. 7.5 minutes left in the game. It's all tied. Leitner with a couple of big baskets the last couple of trips for the Duke Blue Devils.
Brian Oliver, a 3-point attempt, nails it. His third 3-pointer of the game. 19 points for Georgia Tech, 63-60.
Brian Oliver takes out his mouthpiece and has something to say to Phil Henderson as they're on their way down the court.
Henderson, may he retaliate, we'll see.
Georgia Tech really playing very effectively in the passing lanes in this zone defense.
Here's Hurley, spinning to the bucket. And he'll go to the line.
And that's one thing that this defense has not handled very well, the penetration. Hurley recognizing an opportunity right there. Hurley, that's a great spin move. Don't see many people do that against Kenny Anderson. McNeil reaches in and draws the foul before Mackey gets him, but a nice penetration move by Hurley.
Bob does not have a field goal this afternoon.
He had a big offensive game yesterday.
Oh, that he did. 17 points plus 7 assists and 3 steals. Duke beat Maryland by 20. Early now 1 for 3 at the line. He's a 78% foul shooter. Duke trailing by 3. 6:55 left.
Well, I would say that you need every one you can get at this point in the game, but Virginia won that first game after missing 6 front end of the one-on-ones in the last minute of the ball game. So maybe free throw shooting's overrated. I don't know.
That is Scott. Out of Brian Oliver. I guess you have to pick your spots. Here's McNeil. 6:35 left in the second half. 2-point lead for Georgia Tech.
Duke Blue Devils now in the zone defense of their own. Going to make Georgia Tech adjust.
It's amazing Duke's played the zone so well. They don't practice it very often. Here's Scott now with the pump. Henderson with the board.
Well, Scott's got to be careful in there. Doesn't want to get number 4.
Hurley way across to Bricky. Robert from the dotted line, short. Rebound, Mackey.
Good strong play by McNeil to come out of there with the basketball. I don't know how he did that. Took it away from Bricky and Abdelnabi.
Kenny Anderson working on Hurley. This is Oliver. Scott.
Bob, the Blue Devils were trying to get themselves set defensively and looked like they didn't really know what they were supposed to be in. Can't do that against Georgia Tech.
Dennis has 29 now and a 5-point lead for Georgia Tech. Abdelnabi won't go. Rebound, Dennis Scott.
It's a good aggressive move by Abdelnabi. That's one that Duke has to have when he can get to the basket like that.
Georgia Tech, Scott firing, missing. Mackey the follow, just touched it up with the right hand, but didn't get it to go.
Mackey was fighting Brian Oliver for the ball, wasn't able to control it.
Big break for the Blue Devils.
Georgia Tech doing a nice job getting back down, setting the defense.
Leitner finds Bricky, and Robert loses it out of bounds. One of the hands to the head of the Duke students there as an opportunity goes by the boards. 4:48 left. Georgia Tech with 9 offensive rebounds here in the second half, but Bobby Cremins' club now going to take time to talk about it. 4:48 left. 66-61 Georgia Tech. We'll be back. Along with Paul Cameron at ACC Sports Center. Dan Bonner, Bob Rathman with you. The gang of 3 for Georgia Tech. And you see Mr. Scott right on track.
I think one of the key figures there is the fact that the others, Reed, McNeil, and Mackey, have 10 points today. Duke still with no points off the bench.
Duke coming with some pressure now. Trapping in the half court.
Need to do something to make Georgia Tech adjust.
Anderson on Hurley. Now back to the man-to-man.
Got to be careful when you're in that trap. You don't want to spring Dennis Scott through. Scott moves so well without the basketball that he's extremely difficult to guard. And when he's moving without the basketball, his teammates are constantly screening inside for him.
Right through his fingertips.
Well, he was pulling the trigger on that one before he caught it. You see a big smile on Dennis Scott's face. He's suddenly feeling it, I think, in this basketball game.
66-61. 13 turnovers for the Yellow Jackets. So Duke again with an opportunity to get it under 5. They've missed on their last 2 chances. Henderson misfiring. Oliver blows right past Hurley. Runs into Henderson. Still scores.
That's a great play, Brian Oliver. Just taking the ball down and sticking it in the basket all by himself right there.
68-61 Yellow Jackets. 3:50 to play. Leitner powers, misses. He'll shoot 2.
Foul looks like it's going to be against Malcolm Mackey.
And it is his 4th.
Brian Oliver just blowing by Hurley at midcourt. Hurley like he's nailed to the floor. Henderson steps in, and that's a great job by Oliver. It's hard to imagine how difficult that is on the full dribble like that to stop and go straight up in the air. That's what Henderson made him do. A good defensive play by Henderson, but just great offense by Brian Oliver.
Christian Leitner's 19th point. He's gone 3 of 3 at the line. This to pull Duke within 5, and 3:47 left.
Duke going to come with the pressure again, and it's difficult task to pressure a backcourt the quality of Brian Oliver and Kenny Anderson.
Picks up his dribble, deflected ball. Oliver and Scott come up with it. Now to Kenny Anderson, and Georgia Tech wisely backs it out.
Break for Georgia Tech right there. Looked like Duke had come up with the turnover.
A runner by Oliver, and it goes. Duke, the senior, taking over.
Duke did not handle the switch well that time. Mackey came out and screened. Bricky switched over, and then as they tried to get back to their own men, left Oliver wide open.
Anderson for three. Rebound, Scott fighting for it. Dennis comes out of there with it. And we've got a foul on Leitner.
At this point in the ball game, the ball really bouncing in the direction of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Robert Bricky looks like he caught an elbow in the stomach there.
Trainer Max Crowder out to check on him.
Looks like now that he has fallen on his own elbow there. Henderson is going to line up here for the three-point shot. Mackey with some good defensive pressure. There's McNeil and Bricky working after the ball. Bricky just goes right down. You can see right there in that shot that he's holding that elbow.
It's the right arm. Trying to make a fist with that right hand. Hit right on that elbow.
I feel like he paralyzed for a minute there from the elbow down. Mike Krzyzewski, a look of obvious concern on his face.
Robert to his feet and to the bench, and Mike forced to make a substitution. It's going to be Thomas Hill coming in.
Lost in all of that was the fact that Dennis Scott got a tremendous rebound and then did a great job avoiding the tie-up, keeping his pivot foot and drawing the foul.
70-63 Georgia Tech, and 3:04 left. Well, if Duke is going to call on his defense for a stop, it is right here.
See Georgia Tech content to run some time off the clock. Another screen by Mackey, or by McNeil. He and Mackey have been picking people off all day. There he is again.
Oliver is open. Scott kept it alive, but that will be number 4 on Dennis. He played the entire second half with 3 until the 2:33 mark.
The screens out front by Georgia Tech creating a situation where Brian Oliver's wide open, but in this particular case, inside, Thomas Hill has good blockout position against Dennis Scott. The foul is called against Scott. He hands the ball to the referee. He's got to be careful.
Henderson missing. Oliver crashing, but the foul's going to be on Hill of Duke.
Hill drew the foul on one end, now fouls on the other. Exactly the same call.
2:28 to play, and the Yellow Jacket lead is 7. Ricky right back into the game now.
That's team foul, as you say, number 7 on the Duke Blue Devils. So Georgia Tech is going to go to the foul line. They'll be shooting 1-and-1 from here on out. And as aggressively as this game has been played, particularly on the defensive end of the court in the second half, it's amazing that it's taken us almost 18 minutes to get to the bonus situation for either team. You got a quick look at the Duke bench right there, obviously very concerned with the way things are going.
Scored 24 this afternoon.
What a game he's had. What a tournament that he's had. He carried his team in the first half last night against North Carolina State.
Play one, guys. Bob, you're shooting.
Bobby Cremens, you saw up shouting instruction to Dennis Scott and Kenny Anderson.
Oliver now with 25. Oliver's at 20 field goals in 2 games. Duke is down by 9 with 2:20 left. Bricky must fire. He misses. Rebound foul on Leitner. And Oliver back to the foul line, and the wheels are coming off the cart for Duke.
Nice run by Dennis Scott at the shooter, Bricky. Bricky's not as dangerous from out there as he is inside. There's Brian Oliver again. Leitner coming over his back. Oliver, very effective rebounder at 6'4".
Once again, the top rebounding guard in the ACC. And he's going right back to the foul line.
And with 2 minutes and 17 seconds, the Duke Partisans beginning to file out of the arena, Bob. And what we're looking at here, if this lead holds up, is the first time in the history of the Atlantic Coast Conference Tournament that one of the four so-called Big Four schools, that is Duke, North Carolina, Wake Forest, and NC State, that one of those schools has not been in the final championship game.
Hurley throws it away. 74-63. 2:12 to go, and it's looking like Georgia Tech and Virginia tomorrow.
Not a very pretty effort by Georgia Tech, but a gutty effort. They've really done a nice job to get it done.
Now the Yellow Jackets to play keep away. Free throws coming for Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech ran some time off the clock. Great pass by Scott to the cutting Mackey. You can see the Georgia Tech bench very excited by this turn of events in the second half. Georgia Tech down at halftime. Looks like for the second day in a row, they're going to rally from a halftime deficit to pull the game out. Did not play well in the first half yesterday. Did not play particularly well in the first half today. But they kept it close.
Mackey will get another. He shot just 44% at the line. If it is indeed, barring a big Duke surge here in the last 147, Georgia Tech at Virginia tomorrow, boy, that has been the Yellow Jackets' hex team, particularly in Charlottesville.
They lost to Duke twice this year. Looks like they're going to break that jinx. Mackey hits the basket. It's now a 12-point lead. Looks like they're going to get a third crack at the Cavaliers.
Leitner a three-pointer.
Duke, of course, with some three-point firepower of their own.
But the clock is their enemy. 1:30 left.
Want to try to keep the ball moving in this situation. Dennis Scott's going to get fouled. He's a very good free throw shooter. That's 5 on Robert Bricky.
And Dennis will be going to the line. So Bricky fouls out with 1:25 to go and a 9-point lead for Georgia Tech. The Yellow Jackets bidding for their third championship game. They are a minute 25 away. And of course the stage, as we speak, being ready for the championship in terms of the emotions of the two teams. And well, what a day it will be for Terry Holland of Virginia in his final ACC tournament game. And the long faces on the Duke bench. Boy, it has been an emotional roller coaster for this Duke team in the last week to 10 days. Scott putting it home. His 30th point, the 14th time this year he's reached that plateau.
What a year that Dennis Scott has had. It would be a major upset if anybody other than this guy right here is named ACC Player of the Year.
Unanimous first team all-league pick by the sports writers. He's got 31 today.
He's got a shot at National Player of the Year.
Hurley up and over. Out to Scott. Minute 18 left. Georgia Tech by 11. And Hurley with the personal. Georgia Tech will move to the championship game with a record of 23-6. All their losses to ACC teams, interestingly enough.
And that loss total of 6 is the lowest total of losses for any ACC team.
You mentioned Georgia Tech coming from behind, Dan. 11 times this year they've been trailing at the half. They've won 8. Anderson missing the front end. The seconds tick down for Duke. 77-66 Georgia Tech.
At this point, Georgia Tech really only needs to defend that perimeter shot. Got to be careful. Don't want to foul right there. Just let Leitner have it. The two-pointer doesn't hurt you right now. Duke gets the timeout called. 57 seconds left.
A timeout on the floor. 57 seconds remaining. And we'll return after this word from our good friends at Budweiser.
Everyone knows about my expansive.
ACC basketball has been brought to you by Pepsi, Food Lion, Ford, and by First Union National Bank.
Bob Rathman, Dan Bonner, Paul Cameron will join us. Bobby Cremins and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets moving into the ACC championship game. They're just 57 seconds away. The Tech lead is 9. Pressured by Duke after the timeout, and Scott is fouled by Hurley. And Bobby, with that, fouls out of the game. 55 seconds left. Hurley going to the bench. He did have 8 assists today, only 2 points. And Dennis Scott.
Kenny Anderson only has 8 points on the day. His previous low, Anderson that is, was 6 points. So Hurley actually did a pretty good defensive job, particularly in the first half. But too much Brian Oliver, too much Dennis Scott. And I really think the second half contributions of Malcolm Mackey and Johnny McNeil, particularly on the boards, unofficially each of those young men with 8 rebounds.
And I think too, Dan, the dirty work, all the screens and all the blockouts that don't show up in the stat sheet.
Absolutely, they've done a nice job inside. They both laid those bodies on the Duke Blue Devils. Got Dennis Scott and Brian Oliver open. There they go again. Good block out by Johnny McNeil. He's going to draw the foul from Davis.
So more free throws for Georgia Tech as the Yellow Jackets near the finish line in this one, leading 77-68. The Virginia Cavaliers winning by 3 over the Clemson Tigers. And as you mentioned, Dan, for the first time in ACC history, the state of North Carolina will not be represented in the championship game. But all eyes from Atlanta to Charlottesville will be on this building and this team, Georgia Tech, tomorrow as they meet the Cavaliers. McNeil, his 7th point, a Tar Heel. He's from High Point. Coming back to play in Charlotte in this ACC affair. It's a bow. 8 points for Johnny. 79-68.
You can hear the Georgia Tech players telling one another, no foul, no foul, and then they foul. That's easier said than done, I suppose. Malcolm Mackey picks up his 5th personal foul.
Well, Mackey's out of the game. Mike Krzyzewski, his ball club being denied, and Carl Brown coming in. Had Mike been able to win this game, he would have passed Eddie Cameron as Duke's all-time winningest coach, but he'll have to wait for the first round of the NCAA to pass the legendary Duke coach and athletic director.
Malcolm Mackey leaves the ball game. As we said, a very good game. Mackey with 5 points with 8 rebounds.
Leitner, those 27 points, equaling a season high.
I got it, Dave.
79-71. 30 seconds to go.
Gotta keep the ball moving in this situation. Keep the ball moving. It's hard to foul without it being an intentional foul. If you hold the ball, that gives the defense the time to come and commit the foul.
Billy McCaffrey with that last foul, and Oliver stepping up to the line. Well, Dan, of course, tomorrow night, when all is said and done, after we've put the ACC championship to bed, the NCAA Tournament Committee takes over, and the eyes of the nation will be on Kansas City. Duke, of course, will be going to the tournament, and that was never in doubt. But do you wonder now how the loss today might affect their seeding?
Well, I don't think the loss today can help the seeding for the Duke Blue Devils. Well, probably, you know, it could help the seeding for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. I think it really improves their standing.
29 points for Anthony Oliver and a 10-point Georgia Tech lead.
Just a foul by McNeil. He puts his palms up, looks at Bobby Kremen, shrugs his shoulders as if to say, Bobby, what can I do? One thing that this probably means for the Duke Blue Devils is the odds that they'll get a berth in the NCAA tournament in the East probably are very, very low. They're going to have to go someplace else to play. Of course, that's guessing. The selection committee hasn't called me up and asked me what I thought yet. Don't suspect they will. Don't blame them either.
But there is a great deal of pride at stake these 3 days in Charlotte. And boy, it's the one championship that you want to get at least once in your ACC career. Tech hadn't won a tournament game in 3 years until the last 24 hours. They've won 2. 81-72, Georgia Tech with 16 seconds to play. Dan, your thoughts on the matchup tomorrow? Virginia, Georgia Tech.
Well, I think it is a very interesting matchup. We heard Jim Valvano before last night's game talk about how hard it was to match up against Georgia Tech and the kind of problems they presented defensively. And what he said was that you can't play any trick defenses against them, and yet that's what Virginia has done twice. Virginia, the previous 2 meetings, they've guarded Dennis Scott basically in sort of a box and one. Kenny Anderson has had big offensive games, but Dennis Scott has not had big offensive games. And as a result, Virginia's been able to get 2 close victories, the last one coming on a last-second shot. So it ought to be a great matchup. Traditionally, Georgia Tech and Virginia play extremely close basketball games.
Kubek missing the 3. Leitner keeps it alive. Now McNeil gets it. 5 seconds left. Georgia Tech ball. Oliver knocked out of bounds by Kubek. So the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets
advance to the championship game to meet an old nemesis.
And this one's history. Georgia Tech wins it. The final score, 83-72. We'll be back. Stay with us. Our wrap-up is coming up.